God met Abram returning from the slaughter of the kings. What did Abram do? He slaughtered the kings. Now, I have been looking at this for years and years, and I thought, well, why would God appear to someone only after he slaughtered kings? Now, if you understand the whole realms and situation and what has happened in the world, everybody is fighting for kingship. And there's a maneuvering on the earth for rulership, and I will be that. But God said in Revelation, he said, he made us kings and priests to rule and reign on earth. The problem is the Christians wants to fly away, and God doesn't want us from the earth. He said, I pray that you won't take them away, but that you'll keep them from the evil one. And he says we must be overcomers right here. We must overcome the water and the fire. And how do we do that? In Christ only. But we must be overcomers here. Why? Because the earth is groaning in the hope that it will be restored. And we are the carriers of that hope. So here comes the scenario where Melchisedec, King of Peace, appears to Abram when he killed everybody. This is crazy. So what happened when Abram was now living in his hill country and Lot was in Sodom? There were there were kings all around them. There were cities, walled cities with kings. There were 4 kings. If you interpret their names and their cities, it really means all good things. And there were 5 kings that were bad kings. Now, these kings didn't stand together. And the 5 kings had to submit to the 4 kings. This is what happens in the world. There's always lording over everybody else and fighting for position and being the greatest. That's the spirit of Antichrist. It's always, I want to do it my way. If you eat, you'll be like God. Babylon, we'll build a city and we will reach God. There's always a fighting for position in the worldly king system. So the 4 kings subdued and manipulated the 5 kings to a point where they rebelled and they didn't want to pay their taxes anymore, and they started fighting. So a war broke out, and these 4 kings came together. It was Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Eleazar, Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, entitled the king of nations. Now, all their names really mean something good. And if you read it, you think, and go into the meaning of the names, you would say that Abram would side with these kings. But remember, his brother Lot was now in Sodom. Now, Sodom was with the other kings. And they were with Bera, the king of Sodom, Bersha, the king of Gomorrah, Shinab, the king of Atma, Shemeber, the king of Zeboim, and King Bela, which is in Zoar. And all the meaning of their names were like really, really bad. So what happened, this king, these 4 kings, they went around and they smote like 7 little kingdoms. And then they came against Sodom and Gomorrah and the other 3 that was with them. But in the valley of Shell, there was like slime pits. And when they met there, Sodom and Gomorrah and the 5 crowd, they fell down. But now remember, they had Sodom and his wife and his kids and everything. And here was Abram on the mountains. He says, my beloved comes leaping over the mountains. And he heard about Lot. And he says, no. So Abraham came down with 318 people and he slaughtered them. So this is why Melchisedec appeared after the kings were slaughtered. In other words, he was taking the whole situation of the earth. And if you go back to Abraham, he was called out of a city, called out of a nation. He journeyed through the wilderness And he came from Egypt, and now what he did, he slaughtered the kings. And this is the point where everything changed. Now, when he came back, the first guy meeting him was the king of Sodom. Now, if you make a study of Sodom, it's no good. He said the king of Sodom went out to meet him after the return of the slaughter of Chedorlaomer and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is called the King's Dale. The first one that came to meet him was Sodom. Now, he said, the king of Sodom said unto Abram, give me the people and take the goods for yourself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, listen, Abram has been obedient. He's the father of faith. He was persuaded. He didn't even spare his own son. I lift up my hand to the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth. He says that I will not take from you a thread, even to a shoelace. My blessing comes from God. So the first one that met him was the king of Sodom. Just after that, Melchisedec, the king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. And he was the priest of the Most High God. Never have anybody heard about this guy. And we read that he's the King of Peace. So I want to say, if we go back to the scriptures, like the Lord said to my Lord, what is happening here? It's God himself appearing as the Son to him, and it says, I am presenting you with bread and wine. Will you take it? And when he took the bread and wine, then the king of Sodom came and said, oh, can I give you my spoils? He said, I'm not taking that. I'm going for a better course. The order of Melchizedek is a higher order. How many times have people lost their calling because we go for the natural? Because, oh, come on, man. Abraham slaughtered the kings. The spoils should belong to him anyway. And I think he had enough spoils because he gave a tenth. And he blessed him. And he said, blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which have delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. To have an encounter with God is what gives you vision, and it gives you purpose, and it gives you stability. Trying in your own efforts, we will fall for everything by the wayside. But he says that Abram was persuaded, and he didn't look at his wife's barrenness. He didn't look at anything. He was persuaded, and without vision, people perish. Now what happens here is God met Abram. He said he longed to see my day, and he did. Bread and wine. This is what it's going to